The deafening crack of a pistol silenced the crowded saloon as the door flew open, revealing the silhouette of a man whose reputation had spread across the Wyoming territory faster than wildfire in summer. It was 1876, and Thornton Creek was about to witness a confrontation that would change everything for Josephine Adler, the talented pianist whose fingers now trembled above the ivory keys. "You ain't going nowhere, Joe," growled Silas Blackburn, the saloon owner whose meaty hand was wrapped around Josephine's slender wrist. His breath reeked of cheap whiskey as he yanked her from the piano bench. "You signed a contract. You belong to me and this establishment until I say otherwise." Josephine's emerald eyes flashed with defiance. "The contract was for 6 months. It's been 9. I've fulfilled my obligation and I'm leaving for Denver tomorrow." Silas's face contorted with rage. His grip tightened until Josephine winced in pain. "You ungrateful little—" The rest of his sentence was lost as he flung her to the floor. Josephine landed hard, her elegant blue dress spreading around her like spilled water. Before she could scramble to her feet, Silas grabbed her ankle and began dragging her toward his back office. "No." "Let me go," Josephine screamed, her nails scraping against the rough wooden floor as she desperately tried to break free. The patrons watched in stunned silence, too afraid of Blackburn's influence to intervene. All except one. "Let her go." The voice was quiet but carried an unmistakable threat. The crowd parted, revealing a tall figure with dust-covered boots and a worn leather vest. The stranger's hand hovered near the holster on his hip, and the silver star pinned to his chest caught the dim lamplight. "This ain't your business, Marshal," Silas snarled, still gripping Josephine's ankle. "I'm making it my business." Marshal Nathan Mills stepped forward, his steel-gray eyes never leaving Blackburn's face. "Let her go, now." For a tense moment, no one breathed. Then Silas released Josephine's ankle with a contemptuous flick of his wrist. "Fine, take the ungrateful wench. But she won't get work within 100 miles of here. I'll see to that." Nathan extended his hand to Josephine, who grasped it gratefully, allowing him to help her to her feet. Her auburn hair had come loose from its pins, cascading down her back in waves that caught the golden lamplight. "Are you hurt, miss?" Nathan asked, his voice softening. "Nothing but my pride," Josephine replied, straightening her skirts with trembling hands. "Thank you, Marshal. Let's get you out of here." Nathan guided her toward the door, keeping himself between her and Blackburn. "My office isn't far." Outside, the cool night air cleared the stench of stale beer and cigar smoke from Josephine's lungs. Thornton Creek was barely more than a main street with a handful of establishments catering to the ranchers, miners, and railroad workers passing through. The marshal's office stood at the end of the street, a modest wooden building with a small jail attached to the back. "Please, sit down," Nathan offered once they were inside. He lit a lamp, illuminating a space that was sparse but neat. A desk, 2 chairs, a gun rack on the wall, and a small stove in the corner. "Would you like some coffee? It's probably terrible, but it's hot." Josephine smiled despite herself. "That sounds wonderful, thank you." As Nathan busied himself with the coffee pot, Josephine took the opportunity to study him. He was tall and lean, with broad shoulders that spoke of a lifetime of hard work. His face was weathered by sun and wind, but his eyes were kind beneath the brim of his hat, which he'd respectfully removed upon entering the office. "How long have you been in Thornton Creek?" Nathan asked, handing her a steaming cup. 9 months, Josephine replied, wrapping her fingers around the warm tin cup. "I came west after my father died. He was a music teacher in Boston, but there were debts. I had to find work. And you ended up playing piano in Blackburn's saloon." She nodded, taking a sip of the coffee. It was indeed terrible, but she appreciated the gesture. "It wasn't my first choice, but the pay was decent, and he promised to help me get to Denver eventually. I should have known better than to trust him." "Blackburn's not known for his honesty," Nathan agreed, "but he does have influence. If he wants to cause trouble for you, he can." "So what am I supposed to do? Stay and continue working for that monster?" Her voice cracked slightly. Nathan leaned against his desk, considering. The stage coach to Cheyenne leaves tomorrow at noon. From there, you can catch the train to Denver. I can arrange an escort for you to make sure Blackburn doesn't try anything. Thank you, Marshal, but I can't afford the fare now. Blackburn was holding my wages until the end of the month. That's theft, Nathan said firmly. I'll pay him a visit tomorrow and retrieve what's rightfully yours. Josephine looked up at him, surprised by his willingness to help. Why would you do that for me? You don't even know me. I know enough, he replied simply. I know you didn't deserve what happened tonight, and I know that everyone deserves a fair chance. A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the ticking of the clock on the wall and the occasional creak of the wooden building settling for the night. You can stay at Mrs. Peterson's boarding house tonight, Nathan finally said. She's a good woman who doesn't ask too many questions. I'll walk you there. The night air had grown cooler as they walked the short distance to the boarding house. A two-story building painted a faded blue, it stood apart from the saloons and shops that made up most of Thornton Creek. Marshal Mills, an elderly woman greeted them at the door, her gray hair neatly tucked into a bun. What brings you by at this hour? Mrs. Peterson, this is Miss Josephine Adler. She needs a room for the night, possibly longer, Mrs. Peterson's shrewd eyes took in Josephine's disheveled appearance, but her expression remained kind. Of course, I have a room available upstairs. It's small but clean. Thank you, Josephine said gratefully. I'm afraid I don't have much money at the moment, but we'll sort that out tomorrow, Nathan interrupted. I'll be by in the morning to escort Miss Adler to collect her belongings from the saloon. Mrs. Peterson nodded understanding. I'll have breakfast ready at 7. You look like you could use a good meal, dear. As Mrs. Peterson led Josephine upstairs, the young woman turned back to Nathan. Thank you, Marshal. I won't forget your kindness. Nathan, he corrected with a slight smile, and it's just part of the job, but they both knew it was more than that. The next morning, Nathan arrived at the boarding house promptly at 8. Josephine was waiting for him in the small parlor, wearing the same blue dress from the night before, but she'd managed to mend the tear at the hem and had neatly pinned up her auburn hair. Ready? He asked. She nodded, her chin lifted with determination. As I'll ever be. The morning sun cast long shadows as they walked toward the saloon. The town was just coming to life, with shopkeepers sweeping their storefronts and the blacksmith already at work, the rhythmic clanging of his hammer echoing down the street. Let me do the talking, Nathan said as they approached the saloon. Blackburn respects authority, even if he doesn't like it. The saloon was empty except for a young boy mopping the floor and Silas Blackburn himself, counting money behind the bar. His face darkened when he saw them enter. Well, if it isn't the marshal and his damsel in distress, Blackburn sneered. Come back to beg for your job, Josephine. Miss Adler is here to collect her belongings and the wages you owe her, Nathan stated, his voice firm. 3 months' worth by my calculation. Blackburn laughed harshly. I don't owe her a cent. She broke her contract by trying to leave. The contract was for 6 months. She's worked 9, Nathan countered. I've seen the document, Silas. Don't make this difficult. A tense silence followed as Blackburn seemed to weigh his options. Finally, he reached under the bar and pulled out a small leather pouch. Fine, here's what I owe her, but she's not welcome back in this establishment. Ever. Josephine stepped forward to take the pouch, but Nathan moved faster, intercepting it. He counted the money carefully, then frowned. This isn't enough. You're short at least $20. Take it or leave it, Blackburn growled. That's all she's getting from me. Nathan's hand moved to rest on his holster. The law says you pay what you owe, Silas, all of it. The standoff lasted several heartbeats before Blackburn reluctantly pulled out more coins from his vest pocket. There, now get out of my saloon. My things are upstairs, Josephine said quietly. I'll just be a moment. Nathan followed her to the small room above the saloon where she'd been living. It was barely more than a closet with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a hook on the wall for her few clothes. She quickly gathered her possessions into a carpet bag, A few dresses, a hairbrush, a small framed photograph of her father, and a well-worn book of piano music. "Is that everything?" Nathan asked, watching from the doorway. "Yes," Josephine replied, taking one last look around. "Not much to show for 9 months of my life, is it?" "Sometimes what we gain can't be packed in a bag," Nathan said thoughtfully. "Experience, resilience, the strength to start over." Josephine smiled at him, touched by his insight. "You're quite the philosopher for a lawman, Marshal Mills." "I wasn't always a marshal," he admitted. "I've had my share of fresh starts." As they descended the stairs, Josephine felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. She was free of Blackburn and his saloon, but the question remained: what now? Outside, the town was fully awake and Josephine squinted in the bright sunlight. "I suppose I should find passage on the stagecoach," she said, clutching her carpet bag. "About that," Nathan began, looking somewhat uncomfortable. "The stage won't be coming through until next week." There was a washout on the road to Cheyenne after yesterday's rain. Josephine's heart sank. "A week, but I can't stay at Mrs. Peterson's that long, not with what little money I have." "I might have a solution," Nathan offered. "My sister runs a small school just outside of town. She's been looking for someone who could teach music to the children. It would only be temporary, but it would give you a place to stay and earn enough for your ticket to Denver. You do that for me. Recommend me to your sister. Rebecca is a good judge of character. She'll take one look at you and know you're perfect for the job." The confidence in his voice made Josephine blush. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll consider it," Nathan replied with a gentle smile. "I can take you out to the schoolhouse this afternoon if you'd like." "I'd like that very much." True to his word, Nathan borrowed a wagon from the livery stable that afternoon. The ride to the schoolhouse took them through rolling hills dotted with wildflowers and the occasional homestead. The late spring air was sweet with the scent of prairie grass and sage. "It's beautiful out here," Josephine remarked, lifting her face to the warm sun. "So different from Boston." "Takes some getting used to," Nathan agreed. "All this open space, but once it gets under your skin, nowhere else feels quite right. How long have you lived here?" "Came west after the war. Worked as a ranch hand, then a deputy in a few towns before settling here 3 years ago." He glanced at her. "What about you? What's waiting for you in Denver?" Josephine hesitated. "I'm not entirely sure. I have a cousin there who wrote about opportunities for musicians in the growing city, but mostly it's the promise of something different, something better." The schoolhouse appeared on the horizon, a neat white building with a small bell tower. Several children were playing in the yard under the watchful eye of a woman who bore a striking resemblance to Nathan. "Rebecca," Nathan called as they approached. "I've brought a visitor." Rebecca Mills was tall like her brother, with the same gray eyes, though her dark hair was streaked with premature silver at the temples. She greeted them warmly, curious about Josephine's presence. After Nathan explained the situation, Rebecca's face lit up. "A piano teacher. That's exactly what we need. The church donated an old piano last month, but none of us can play a note." "I'd be happy to teach the children," Josephine offered, "and perhaps play for church services as well if that would be helpful." "Absolutely. Pastor Williams will be thrilled." Rebecca clapped her hands together. "I have a spare room in my cottage just behind the schoolhouse. It's yours for as long as you need it." Everything was happening so fast that Josephine felt dizzy with the sudden change in her fortunes. Just yesterday, she'd been trapped in Blackburn's saloon, playing bawdy tunes for drunken cowboys. Now she was being offered a respectable position teaching music to children. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Both of you. Your kindness is overwhelming." "It's settled then," Nathan said with satisfaction. "I'll bring Josephine's things by later this afternoon." As they walked through the schoolhouse, Rebecca pointed out the piano in the corner of the main room. It was indeed old, with yellowed keys and a few scratches on its oak casing, but to Josephine it looked beautiful. She sat down on the bench and gently pressed a key. The note rang out, slightly flat but clear. Without thinking, her fingers began to dance across the keys, playing a sweet, gentle melody that filled the room with warmth. The children, hearing the music, came running inside, their eyes wide with wonder. Josephine continued playing, adding flourishes and embellishments to the simple tune. When she finally stopped, the children erupted in applause. "That was wonderful," Rebecca exclaimed. "The children have never heard live music like that before." Josephine looked up to see Nathan watching her from the doorway, a look of admiration in his eyes that made her heart skip a beat. "I think you'll fit in just fine here, Miss Adler," he said softly. In the days that followed, Josephine settled into her new routine. She taught piano lessons in the afternoons after regular school hours and helped Rebecca with her younger pupils in the mornings. On Sundays, she played hymns for the small white church in town, filling the simple building with music that seemed to touch the souls of everyone present. And Nathan visited. Not every day, but often enough that the children began to tease Josephine about the Marshal's special interest in their music teacher. "Marshal Mills is sweet on you, Miss Adler," 8-year-old Emma declared one afternoon as Josephine helped her position her fingers correctly on the piano keys. "That's nonsense," Josephine replied, though she couldn't stop the blush that crept up her cheeks. "He's just being kind." "My pa says he never came out to the school this much before you got here," Emma persisted with the blunt honesty of a child, "and he smiles different when he looks at you." Josephine couldn't deny the flutter in her stomach whenever Nathan appeared. Their conversations had grown longer and more personal with each visit. She'd learned about his time fighting for the Union, his journey west to escape the painful memories of war, his dreams of someday having a ranch of his own. In turn, she'd shared stories of her childhood in Boston, her father's passion for music, her mother's death when she was young. One evening, a week after her arrival, Nathan invited her to ride with him to a ridge overlooking the valley. The sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks as they sat side by side on a fallen log. "Have you given any more thought to Denver?" Nathan asked, his voice carefully neutral. Josephine looked out at the vast landscape before them. "Less and less," she admitted. "I'm finding Thornton Creek has unexpected charms." "Such as?" A hint of a smile played at the corners of his mouth. "The children, for one, they're so eager to learn." "And Rebecca has been like the sister I never had." She paused, gathering her courage. "And there's a certain lawman who's not half bad company." Nathan's smile widened. "High praise indeed." "The stagecoach comes tomorrow," Josephine said softly. "I have enough money for a ticket now." "I know." Nathan's expression grew serious. "I won't ask you to stay, Josephine. You came west looking for something better, and maybe Denver is where you'll find it. And if I've already found it," she turned to face him, her heart pounding. Nathan reached out, gently tucking a strand of auburn hair behind her ear. "Then I'd be the happiest man in the territory." Their first kiss was tentative, a gentle brush of lips that quickly deepened into something more passionate. When they finally pulled apart, Josephine felt as though the world had shifted beneath her feet. "I think I missed that stagecoach," she whispered against his lips. "There'll be another one next week," he murmured back, "and the week after that." "I might be busy for the foreseeable future," Josephine said with a smile. "I've recently taken a permanent position as the music teacher in Thornton Creek." Nathan laughed, pulling her close again. "I heartily approve of that decision, Miss Adler." Summer faded into fall, and Josephine's life in Thornton Creek took on a rhythm as familiar as the music she played. Her days were filled with teaching, her evenings often spent in Nathan's company. They would walk along the creek after dinner, talking about everything and nothing, or sit on Rebecca's porch, Nathan playing his harmonica while Josephine hummed along. Their courtship was unhurried but purposeful. Nathan was a man who knew his own mind, and he made no secret of his intentions. By the time the first snow fell, the entire town was waiting for an announcement. It came on Christmas Eve, during the pageant at the schoolhouse. The children had performed admirably, singing the carols Josephine had taught them, reciting Bible verses with only a few stumbles. As the evening drew to a close, Nathan stood up from his seat in the back row and made his way to the front of the room. "If I could have everyone's attention for just a moment more," he said, his deep voice carrying easily through the crowded schoolhouse. "I have something important to say." A hush fell over the room as Nathan turned to face Josephine, who was seated at the piano. He took her hand, gently pulling her to her feet. "Josephine Adler, you came to Thornton Creek by chance, but I believe with all my heart that it was Providence that brought you here. You've brought music and joy not just to our town, but to my life." He knelt down on one knee, producing a small velvet box from his pocket. "Would you do me the great honor of becoming my wife?" Josephine's hands flew to her mouth as tears of joy filled her eyes. The box contained a simple gold band with a small pearl at its center, modest but beautiful, just like their love. "Yes," she whispered, then louder for all to hear. "Yes, Nathan Mills, I will marry you." The schoolhouse erupted in cheers and applause as Nathan slipped the ring onto her finger and rose to embrace her. In that moment, surrounded by the community that had become her family, Josephine knew she had found what she'd been searching for all along. The wedding took place on a crisp February day in the white clapboard church. Josephine wore a dress of ivory satin that Rebecca had helped her sew, with lace at the collar that had once belonged to Nathan's mother. The entire town turned out for the celebration. Even Silas Blackburn, who had eventually come to respect the marshal's authority, if not the man himself. As Josephine walked down the aisle toward her future husband, she couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought her to this moment. From the frightened young woman being dragged across a saloon floor to the confident bride she was today, it seemed almost like a dream. Nathan's eyes never left hers as she approached, his expression one of wonder and devotion that made her heart soar. When she reached him, he took her hands in his, strong and steady. "You are more beautiful than I deserve," he whispered. "We deserve each other," she replied with certainty. Their vows were simple but heartfelt, promises to love and honor each other through whatever life might bring. When the pastor pronounced them husband and wife, Nathan's kiss was both tender and possessive, a seal on the covenant they had made. The reception was held at the schoolhouse, transformed for the occasion with garlands of evergreen and ribbons. Tables groaned under the weight of food contributed by every family in town: roasted meats, fresh bread, pies of every description. Dancing continued well into the night, with Josephine taking turns at the piano so that others could provide music when she wanted to dance with her new husband. As midnight approached, Nathan led Josephine away from the celebration to the small house he had purchased on the edge of town. It wasn't grand, just 4 rooms with a porch that wrapped around 2 sides, but he had spent months preparing it for her, painting the walls, building furniture with his own hands. "Welcome home, Mrs. Mills," he said as he carried her across the threshold. Josephine's eyes filled with happy tears as she took in the cozy parlor with its polished wooden floors, and the piano, her piano from the schoolhouse, positioned near the window, where the morning light would fall upon it. "The school board decided you should have it as a wedding gift," Nathan explained, seeing her surprise. "They've already ordered a new one for the children. It's perfect," she whispered, running her fingers lovingly over the familiar keys. "Everything is perfect." Life as a marshal's wife had its challenges. There were nights when Nathan was called away to handle disturbances or track down cattle rustlers, leaving Josephine to worry until his return. But there were far more days filled with simple joys, tending their vegetable garden together, planning lessons for her growing number of music students, sitting on the porch in the evening watching the sunset paint the western sky. In the spring of their first year of marriage, Josephine shared news that brought Nathan to his knees with gratitude. Their family would be growing by one come winter. The entire town celebrated with them, and Rebecca immediately began knitting tiny garments for her future niece or nephew. As Josephine's body changed with the miracle growing inside her, Nathan's protective instincts intensified. He insisted on accompanying her to and from the schoolhouse, much to the amusement of the townspeople. He built a cradle for the baby, carving delicate patterns of leaves and flowers into the headboard. "You're going to spoil this child terribly," Josephine teased as she watched him work. "That's my right as a father," he replied with a grin. "Besides, our son will need to know how much he's loved." "Our daughter, you mean," she corrected with a playful smile. It had become a running joke between them, this good-natured disagreement about the baby's gender. Their daughter, Elizabeth Rebecca Mills, arrived on a snowy December night with her mother's auburn hair and her father's gray eyes. Nathan paced outside the bedroom door as Rebecca, and the midwife assisted with the birth, his face pale with concern until he heard the newborn's healthy cry. When he was finally allowed to enter, the sight of Josephine cradling their child brought tears to his eyes. "She's beautiful," he whispered, sitting gently on the edge of the bed, "just like her mother." "Would you like to hold your daughter?" Josephine asked, carefully transferring the tiny bundle into his arms. Nathan's large hands, so capable with a gun or rope, trembled slightly as he cradled his daughter for the first time. "Hello, Elizabeth," he murmured. "I'm your pa." The baby gazed up at him with unfocused eyes, her tiny fingers curling around one of his. In that moment, Nathan Mills' veteran, lawman, husband discovered a new dimension to love that he hadn't known existed. As winter gave way to spring, and spring to summer, their life settled into a new rhythm that revolved around Elizabeth's needs and milestones. Her first smile, her first laugh, the first time she rolled over each achievement was celebrated as though no child had ever accomplished such feats before. On warm evenings, Nathan would often sit on the porch with Elizabeth on his lap while Josephine played the piano inside, the music drifting through the open windows. Sometimes he would sing softly to the baby, old lullabies his mother had sung to him, his deep voice a gentle rumble that never failed to soothe Elizabeth to sleep. "You're a natural father," Josephine remarked one evening as she joined them on the porch, leaning against the railing to watch her husband and daughter. "She makes it easy," Nathan replied, looking down at the sleeping child. "Sometimes I can hardly believe she's ours." "Believe it," Josephine said with a smile, "and there might be more in our future if that's something you'd want." Nathan's eyes lit up. "Nothing would make me happier than a house full of children, especially if they're all as perfect as Elizabeth. Even if they're boys," Josephine teased. "Even then," Nathan agreed with a laugh. "Though girls are clearly superior, as I've learned from living with you too." As Elizabeth grew from infant to toddler, Thornton Creek grew as well. The railroad expanded, bringing more settlers and businesses to the area. Nathan was busier than ever keeping the peace in a town that seemed to add new saloons and gambling halls every month. Josephine continued teaching music, now with Elizabeth playing at her feet or, more often, attempting to help by banging enthusiastically on the lower keys while her mother instructed students. The little girl showed an early aptitude for music that filled Josephine with pride. "She has your talent," Nathan observed one evening as they watched 3-year-old Elizabeth pick out a simple tune on the piano. "And your determination," Josephine added, laughing as their daughter frowned in concentration, trying again when she hit a wrong note. Their happiness was not without shadows. The winter Elizabeth turned 4, an influenza epidemic swept through the territory. Josephine worked tirelessly alongside Rebecca to care for sick children and their families, exposing herself to the illness despite Nathan's concerns. "I can't just hide away while others suffer," she insisted when he urged caution. "These children need help." Her devotion to the community came at a cost when she herself fell ill with the fever. For 3 terrifying days, Nathan barely left her side, bathing her burning forehead with cool cloths, forcing her to drink when she could, praying with a fervor he hadn't felt since the war. Rebecca took charge of Elizabeth, keeping the child away from the sickroom and trying to explain in terms a 4-year-old could understand why her mama couldn't read her bedtime stories. On the 4th day, Josephine's fever broke. When she opened her eyes to find Nathan asleep in the chair beside their bed, his hand still clasping hers, his face lined with exhaustion and worry, she knew just how close she had come to leaving him. "Nathan," she whispered, her voice weak but clear. He woke instantly, relief flooding his features as he saw her alert gaze. "Josephine, thank God." His voice broke as he pressed his lips to her hand. "I thought I might lose you." "It would take more than a fever to separate me from you and Elizabeth," she assured him, though the illness had left her weaker than she cared to admit. Recovery was slow, but by spring, Josephine had regained her strength. The epidemic had changed something in Nathan, however. He began to speak more seriously about his long-held dream of leaving law enforcement for ranching. "Life's too short and too precious," he explained as they sat on their porch one evening, watching Elizabeth chase fireflies in the yard. "I've done my duty as marshal for 6 years now. Maybe it's time for someone else to wear the star." "Are you sure?" Josephine asked. "You've always taken such pride in your work." "I'm proud of what I've accomplished," Nathan agreed. "But I'm prouder still of being your husband and Elizabeth's father. That's where I want my energy to go now." By summer's end, Nathan had resigned his position and purchased a small ranch 10 miles outside of town. The house was larger than their town home, with plenty of room for their growing family and necessity, as Josephine was expecting their second child. The move to the ranch coincided with Elizabeth starting school, where she quickly became a favorite of her Aunt Rebecca. Josephine continued to teach music, though now students came to the ranch for lessons, and she played for church services only twice a month instead of every Sunday. Their son, James Nathan Mills, was born in the master bedroom of the ranch house on a clear October morning, with his sister peeking curiously around the midwife's skirts to get her first glimpse of her baby brother. "He looks like a little red potato," was Elizabeth's initial assessment, causing both parents to laugh despite their exhaustion. "He'll improve with age," Nathan promised, lifting his daughter so she could see better. "You didn't look much different when you were born." "I most certainly did," Elizabeth protested with all the dignity a 5-year-old could muster. "I was beautiful, Mama said so, and you still are," Josephine assured her. "Would you like to hold your brother?" The sight of Elizabeth carefully cradling the newborn, her earlier criticism forgotten as she cooed to her baby, sealed the family's happiness. As Nathan sat beside Josephine on the bed, his arm around her shoulders, their children before them, he marveled at the journey that had brought them to this moment. "10 years ago, I never imagined this life," he murmured against her hair. "A home, children, you." "Neither did I," Josephine admitted. "Especially not that night in the saloon. I thought I was at the end of my rope. And instead, it was just the beginning." Nathan's arms tightened around her, "the beginning of everything that matters." As the Wyoming sun set beyond their window, painting the sky in colors no artist could capture, Josephine leaned into her husband's embrace, surrounded by the family they had created together. From the darkest moment of her life had come the greatest light, a love story written not in the glamorous saloons or bustling cities she had once dreamed of, but in the wide open spaces and honest hearts of the American West. And she wouldn't change a single note of the melody they had composed together.